It's 2022, believe it or not. Last year was a great year for Hunt as it really blossomed somewhat, adding more core content like the new map Desal and the fourth boss Scrapbeak. We saw events that introduced new legendary hunters and a plethora of new additional weapons and of course skins. On top of that, a bunch of quality of life additions and some changes to existing features. So what has Hunt got in store for us this year? Well, as some of you may have noticed, the roadmap mysteriously disappeared towards the end of 2021. Hunt's roadmap has been an enigma for some time, not always being quite up to date, and I think the last time it actually was updated was August last year, and now as it's completely MIA, it's thrown much up for speculation. I've actually had to edit this video a fair bit because since starting it, Crytek have announced update 1.7.2, with a couple of teaser images with the Berthia Deadeye and the Scotfield Precisions. Also teased was the Azure Arsenal coming February the 1st. I imagine these will be cosmetics only. So let's talk about what to expect this year from Crytek and Hunt, and do let me know in the comments below what you want to see. From core content to just, well, more content, there's only so many cosmetics you really need before you realize, well, they are just that, cosmetics. There's always going to be cosmetics. I want to add my own ideas to the list of what I think Hunt needs to also bring to the table this year, but before that, let's look at the last known version of the roadmap, before of course it mysteriously disappeared. And taking a look at what was anticipated with all the things that actually came to Hunt in 21, you might actually be able to work out what the team is working on and what to expect this year perhaps. So the big question is, will we see a new map and or a new boss this year? Probably not. The time it takes to implement the core content is consuming and requires a lot of attention to detail, and paying attention to how the game and even the gameplay itself affects design decisions. It is a big task, which Crytek pulled off so well with Desal and Scrapbeak. Desal offers a completely different experience to the previous two maps by really changing the terrain and how compounds were designed. Gameplay was also the focus of Scrapbeak, even though interactions proved not that different from the other bosses, apart from offering you options on how best to tackle Scrapbeak, weighing up the outcome. Passively, the encounter had a huge effect on PvP and was a welcome addition. So, if they do add some larger content in the form of a newer map or a newer boss this year, I will eat my shoes. Anyway, onto the roadmap. We first have features. Custom ammo has since been introduced with update 1.5. Outfit customization has been rumored to be a system locked behind the prestige wall, as robust a system as it is. Looking at further ways to unlock such items within the current system doesn't seem technically feasible without a massive change. So how likely is this something to come this year? Under game mode, the only thing that was last noted was additional trial challenges. Desal currently doesn't have any available. This looks like a likely addition to the game this year, along with no doubt more skins from any additional trial stars you can earn. Listed on the front end, further UI usability and quality of life improvements. Arguably, this is something that will be an ongoing quest for Crytek. We had some great additions last year with room for improvement for sure. Without a complete overhaul, I doubt much will change in the UI department. Dynamic leaderboards. Without details, we can speculate this means weekly or even monthly refresh boards. This would be a welcome addition to the game, but you have to ask to what end is it actually necessary. Certainly, the current iteration of leaderboards can influence how players approach the game. There's an unhealthy amount of Smurf accounts across all platforms that are created to just prove a point, for example. Problem is, the actual point of a Smurf account negates the actual point trying to be made, and some even have more Smurf accounts than they collectively have brain cells, so the game just ends up with a bloated leaderboard. Introducing leaderboards for a duration of an event might help cover necessity, if at all perhaps additional rewards. Next up is the hardcore opt-in. Again, speculating with what this might entail, we can assume as the game over time has started providing more info per match and a fair few hand-holding mechanics, a game mode that takes much of this away, as it's an opt-in suggestion only, is likely something that would probably put you as the player or team at a disadvantage, removing certain game elements for the match ahead. Last on the list and most anticipated is the 2D mission replay. Since the beginning of Hunt, there's always been a requirement for players to understand how certain scenarios unfolded or how things came to be. Post-match replay is defo high up on something I would look forward to coming sooner than later. As long as Hunt retains the shrouded mystery during games and such post data couldn't be used to influence the overall nature of the game, players might look to adapt to certain trends, and overall this would be a useful inclusion. Under Arsenal, most of these are self-explanatory and less contrivial, as such expected additions are welcome. Of course, what these pertain to exactly, we don't know whether the expected additions have already been added. Under Cast, Boss Target 4, well, that's already been added. Legendary Hunters, that I'm sure will keep appearing at monthly rates, and the most baffling one, further improvements to existing AI. Last year, 3 changes to existing AI occurred. Dr. Grunt was introduced amongst the Armored Concertina and the Headlight-wearing Grunt. I'd expect more no doubt this year, but let's talk about the AI itself. Certain enemy behaviors for existing mobs are questionable at best, whether it's the unpredictability of hellhounds or immolators that seemingly are broken. Aggro ranges and overpopulated matches are certainly some aspects I hope they look at refining for a better and overall less frustrating experience. Under the World category, only Map 3 and New Time of Day were listed. Of course, these have been added. Performance is always something that is definitely required looking into. Under Audio, we have the Book of Songs, which was released before year's end, and of course, a few tracks have already been added to the gramophones. So, definitely complete and done. Under Service, there were a few additions we can see as ongoing service requests and requirements, with the exception of custom lobbies, as a standout feature that again could have an impact on the game. For myself, a streamer first and foremost, this would be a great inclusion for community games and content, as long as no progression, XP, contraband or lost hunters affected the overall game. I can see this as a potential addition this year. As focus on PvP becomes more and more prevalent in Hunt, whether you like it or not, Crytek themselves could host tournaments and events with a feature like this, and those guys out there already hosting tournaments can refine their experience they offer by and large to the community. So that covers what existed on the roadmap before it mysteriously disappeared. Okay, so onto my list of things I would like to see in Hunt this year. The top one for me that's been discussed a lot on stream is a change in player progression. A complete overhaul, if you like. Time and time again, I see the argument that there's not enough incentive for people to prestige, and, as is the grind culture games have brought into over the last decade or so, time spent on the game is weighed up along, and probably more so than the actual monetary cost. And with that, what Hunt offers, it's something that definitely needs to evolve with the times. In my experience, players that naturally prestige do play better overall, having bought into the challenge prestiging obviously offers. Having learned to play with less when there's more at stake makes for less mistakes. This is something I've picked up on across all platforms. It's not a question of skill, just how players approach the game. But this is a non-tangible reward that largely goes unnoticed until you've actually hit several prestige levels, but more on that another time. More is better in this case, and rewards are a necessity to keep people interested. Hunt itself continues to fail and attract a larger audience, maybe because of lack of such a progression system to help develop that time worth investing. Speaking with much larger content creators, many have found it difficult to introduce or even enjoy the game when their respective communities have neither played Hunt or understand the skill and knowledge required to tackle the game. I see some larger content creators do indeed praise Hunt for what it is, but have barely put the time into the game themselves to fully understand what Hunt has to offer, and don't capture the essential aspects gamers are looking for amongst a sea of poor releases. When other games provide a constant action, it's hard for people to really appreciate what Hunt does differently, and as non-biased as possible, better in many ways. But it's the core attractions we can see when it comes to putting the time into the game that also doesn't help. Apart from that, as welcome as new traits are, we've seen some that work cohesively with certain loadouts or even other traits. If there was a way to build upon towards a class system, let's say, it might expand upon much of the gameplay itself in new ways. For example, there's a bunch of poison traits, and it's obvious these don't work without at least utilizing some poison options within your loadout. But this in itself can be limiting it without much benefit. Introducing a change in traits to work more like picking a subclass with benefits as your hunter levels up would refine the overall direction and change up the gameplay a little too, perhaps. Hunt also needs to keep up momentum if we're not likely to see much in the way of larger content drops, so I'm excited either way to see what is in store, but the health of the game sorely needs looking into. Bugs and server issues can plague the game, but don't majorly affect the experience, but nonetheless are frustrating. On top of that, dual wielding continues to separate the player base. It really needs a good adjustment in how the mechanic itself behaves. RNG when it comes to hunt just feels like it doesn't have a place, and it's a shame because it can suck the enjoyment out of the game completely. Definitely top of the list of things that I hope Crytek look into this year. Also, one of the other top things I see commented on quite regularly is the hit detection system, or lack of. Take this clip for example. I couldn't even tell you how this happened, and it has stumped the devs as well. 2 months on, no one quite knows what has happened, whether or not this shot was invalidated, but as a projectile was actually formed, no one seems to have any actual answers. And it's things like this that I hope Crytek look at and actually get fixed. Anything else that you think or you want to see in Hunt this year, just let me know. Leave a comment below if you agree or disagree with anything that I've put forward here. At current, I am going through a rebrand. I do everything myself, so it may take a moment. I may do a separate video on why, and hopefully that might interest other content creators or anyone that's known me since I started this journey into content creation. Until then, I'll leave you with the wise words of a great man. I'll be back.